Right friends, welcome back to editorial discussion, and as I have already told you, from 1st May onwards I will make some changes. In fact, from 1st May onwards we will go with the revision part in one session of 20 to 25 minutes, and one session we will discuss 20 questions for UPSC preliminary examination, and this in lieu of editorial discussion we will bring some new format, right, that will be highly useful to you. We will come up with the mini capsules and analysis capsules. Probably that may be the better solution for small news items where some 3-4 reasons, or you can say around 5 to 6 sentences are involved, or when the issue relates to some minor issue, then we can present it as a mini capsule, and when the issue involves analysis we can present it as analysis capsule. So, like that we want to present by analyzing at least 3-4 newspapers, important newspapers, Economic Times along with the Hindu, but the Hindu will be the anchor, please do not forget. By taking the Hindu as the anchor, by taking the newspaper reports of the Indian Express, Mint, Times of India, Economic Times, Business Line, then important articles, what I will do is I will club and I will come up with a comprehensive analysis as well as mini modules, right. So, that is in my mind. So, from 1st May let us try to implement it, and we will see if it is good, then we will continue that. Then the first one is a call for reform. I would like to tell you this: World Bank and IMF, they were formed subsequent to Second World War, and the basic comment of IMF and World Bank is they are dominated by Western countries and they are not realizing the recent evolution of this emerging economies. Still they are working with the 20th century mindset. They are not looking at 21st century emergence of countries like China, India, Brazil. Several countries came up to the forefront and they are not recognizing the need for reforming it, right. So, Bretton Woods institutions, IMF as well as World Bank, these two are headquartered in Washington, and if you look at World Bank group from preliminary examination perspective, this is important. World Bank group has got 5 institutions. These 5 institutions were formed in various times. All of them have not formed at a time, and out of the 5, IBRD, this is International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, loosely called World Bank. So, this was established in July 1944, and reduction of poverty is the main thing, and here it gives long duration loans for developing countries. Long duration loans to developing countries, basically to focus on social and economic development. And the second organ, IDA, this International Development Association, looks at poorest of the poor countries. It gives longer maturity loans with very low interest rates, or you can say in the examination perspective, for underdeveloped countries. The organization which gives soft loans is IDA. Soft loan means the interest rate will be less than the market interest rate. Then IFC, basically here private sector participation in the developing countries. The theme of World Bank is without private sector cooperation countries cannot develop. So, keeping that in mind, to promote private sector development in developing countries, this IFC was formed. Then this MIGA, and there are risks associated with investments. The risks may be some political risk, may be non-commercial risk. So, political and non-commercial risks, when risks are associated with investors, how to protect them, for that purpose this MIGA was formulated, and ICSID was formulated to settle the disputes, international investment disputes. So, this entire 5 organization forms World Bank group, and World Bank now divides countries based on their per capita GNI, gross national income per capita. There are four categories, there are four categories: low income countries, lower middle income, upper middle income, high income, and India is categorized as lower middle income country. Please understand. If you go ahead, as I have already told you, IMF was basically established to solve the balance of payments related problems. IMF is established basically to solve balance of payments related problems, whereas World Bank basic goal is poverty reduction and social and economic development and quota reforms. In fact, minor quota reforms. And before going ahead, what is meant by quota? I am talking about IMF. Quota means it determines the size of contingency fund. It determines the size of contingency fund at the disposal of IMF. Basically, these are intended to lend to the countries in need of help. At the same time, they also influence the lending decisions. Now, America has got around 17 to 18% share. America has got 17 to 18% and India's share is around 2.75% or so, right. So, when the share is more, they influence the lending decisions with the countries having more quotas have got more power. So, there were two things which took place last year as far as IMF is concerned. First and the foremost is 2010 reforms, quota reforms. That means, what is the meaning of quota reform? To increase the share of developing countries. When the share of developing countries is increased, then the share of developed countries will reduce. Probably they are not ready for that. Only 2010 reforms culminated in 2016 after 6 years, and because of that minor reforms, our quota increased slightly around 0.3% or so, and at the same time another important aspect is because of that minor reforms, this 6% of the quota shares increased to developing countries, right. So, this minor change occurred last year, but one important point is to ensure that minor change, it took 6 years. The second point, most important point is in the appointment of executive directors. Previously, there were 5 nominated directors, you can say. So, executive reforms were also implemented for the first time. Now, those nominated directors have gone. Now, totally the board consists of, executive board consists of entirely elected executive directors. So, previously it ends the category of appointed executive directors. Previously there were 5 appointed executive directors. Now that has gone. All 24, if I am not wrong, all are elected now. There were minor changes took place because of the fight from developing countries, but lot more needs to be done. And now there is the competition from AIIB also. So, developing countries and changed perspective. Now, basically IMF is looking for, or you can say IMF at present is looking at short term crisis management when balance of payments problem is there. But AIIB already came into existence, NDB came into existence, global dynamics are changing, Asian countries are raising, and some of the countries like Brazil, Mexico, they are also raising. So, under these circumstances, developed countries are not in a position to reduce their power in the board. At the same time, they are not in a position to reduce their quotas. That is the biggest problem faced by IMF. So, if IMF to stay alive, basically they should change this quota structure basically to represent the present dynamics of the interests of developing countries. right. So, this is all about this and about the reforms in IMF. A potential question can be asked in UPSC, but this article is not full to address that. So, we will come up with some capsule sometime later this year, and this is one important potential question for UPSC. Then hedging bets as Trump scouts for deals. Here in this article, there are 3-4 aspects. I will take 4-5 minutes on this. First one is Trump initial status quo actions. There is not much change. One is he attacked Syrian airbase after children were died. After chemical attack, he attacked Syrian airbase, and second point is he also attacked Afghanistan targeting Islamic State. So, these two things are in tune with the previous American policy. That is why I have written status quo actions, and previously he also abandoned the position that China is the currency manipulator. Initially he told China is the currency manipulator, but he toned down the rhetoric. Then the next one is he changed his original position on NATO. Initially he told that America will not spend money for the security of European countries, but now he changed that stance. Previously he told he will impose steep tariffs on the goods from Mexico and China. He changed that stance also. He has not opened trade war with the rest of the world by imposing tariffs on goods from Mexico or China. So, he changed the stance. Similarly, senior officials are travelling to Europe and Asia seeking to soothe frayed bonds with the traditional allies. That means, because of initial actions of Donald Trump, initial statements of Donald Trump, relations were strained, and to in fact normalize the relations, officials are visiting to various countries in Europe and Asia. So, this all status quo, or you can say he came back from the initial stance. Now, let us look at disruptive actions. He withdrawn from TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, leave it, some pluses are there, minuses are there, but he came out of TPP. But the most important alarming situation for the world is reviewing withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement. Paris Climate Agreement, we have read the news report today, the carbon dioxide emissions reached 410 ppm in the atmosphere, alarming 410 ppm in the atmosphere, and under the circumstances Donald Trump withdrawing from Paris Climate Agreement is not good for the world as a whole. Review of trade ties to reduce trade deficit, next reviewing guest worker program like H1B. So, these are all you can say disruptive actions, and these are the countries of Trans-Pacific Partnership. And if you look at Trump and India, nothing is clearly visible at this juncture. First one is he mentioned about India, India imposes 100% duty on this high value products or motorcycles. So, he mentioned that country India imposes 100% duty on particular motorcycles. Next, he blamed Indian IT companies for allegedly gaming the lottery system of H1B visas. Third point is at the United Nations, American ambassador offered to mediate between India and Pakistan. In future, what stance it is going to take, it is not clear. And there are news reports that it may distance Iran because of pressure from Saudi Arabia and Israel. And USA also expressed concern about the region, that is India-Pakistan region, becoming a potential nuclear flashpoint. And America is also quoting complaints, or you can say America is nowadays coming up with complaints against India with regard to intellectual property violations. And recently, India's crackdown on Christian charity organization, that is Compassion International, that has also not gone down well with the United States of America. So, these are the initial things which are emanating after 100 days of Donald Trump, and we have to wait and see further. At this juncture, everything looks uncertain and only one can comment as the time passes. Look into the next one. This is the expanding universe of intellectual property. Already, if you have invented the drug, you have protection or intellectual property protection for 20 years. This is the normal time I am telling. 20 years is the normal time of patents. Of course, please do not forget, if government feels that the newly patented drug is not serving the humanity, it is not accessible to the humanity, compulsory licensing system is there. We discussed in the previous capsule. As far as pharma is concerned, the first and the foremost point is this: patents. Patents are normally valid for 20 years, and when the government feels that the invented drug is not serving, or you can say is not accessible to the society at large, then they can give compulsory licensing after 3 years if I am not wrong. So, that is one aspect. Now, another aspect is data exclusivity. Before going ahead, what is the difference between generic drug and this, you can say this patent? Generic drug is one aspect and branded drug is another aspect. What is the difference between generic and branded drug? Here, generic drug is identical or bioequivalent to brand name drug, and recently Medical Council of India has also gave instruction that the doctors must prescribe generic name of the drug, but not the branded product name. So, here generic drug is identical for bioequivalent to a brand name drug in dosage, strength, quality, performance and intended use. And in most of the cases, generic products are available once the patent protections afforded given to the original developer have expired, right. So, here generic drug is very important, and at the same time, please do not forget this Jan Aushadhi scheme. Jan Aushadhi scheme, here Bureau of Pharma PSUs of India under the aegis of this Department of Pharmaceuticals, so please do not forget. So, it is implementing this scheme, Jan Aushadhi scheme, and this is all about generic drugs and Jan Aushadhi by Government of India. Let us come back to the present article, data exclusivity. Data exclusivity means it is kind of intellectual property protection. Basically, let us assume some X has invented some drug. X has invented some drug. He will have the protection for 20 years, let us say patent protection. That means he invented the drug by spending a lot of money in research and development, and while approving the drug, he will go for clinical trials, he will go for preclinical, clinical trials, first on animals, then on human beings. So, this clinical trials data, that cannot be used by any other person while applying for generic version. So, that protection is data exclusivity. You got the point? Here, if I invented some drug, I will get patent for 20 years or so. Even after that also, no one can utilize, no one can quote this clinical data. So, that type of protection the manufacturers of this patented drugs, they are asking. So, data exclusivity is a kind of intellectual property protection wherein clinical trial and other data submitted by the original drug manufacturer cannot be used by a drug regulator authority to approve a generic version. And recently, in fact, one module also we produced, there at present this data exclusivity clause is there for 4 years. After 4 years, this data exclusivity goes away, and the pharmaceutical companies, whoever invented the drugs, they are asking for 10 years of data exclusivity. That news report we have seen, but this news article is silent about this aspect. So, we have to cross check whether that was correct or not. So, leave that aside. And now, what do you understand by data exclusivity? I explained here. Normally, introduction of new drug, any new drug is a time consuming and expensive process, and a drug comes to the market only after extensive preclinical and clinical trials on animals initially and human beings subsequently before it is introduced for public use. So, as I have already told you, as per Drugs and Cosmetics Act, this data exclusivity is 4 years, but this article is silent about this. Data exclusivity prevents drug regulators from referring to or relying on data submitted by the original company. Some original company submitted some clinical data. So, subsequently, if some generic version is manufactured, then they need not go for this clinical trials once again, because if the generic manufacturers have to go for clinical trials once again, they cannot manufacture that generic drug, because this clinical trials involve huge investment, huge money is required, and ultimately what happens, the cost of drug will increase. Generic manufacturers may not be able to reduce much. So, here pharmaceutical companies have been pushing for data exclusivity to prolong already existing monopoly, because they get 20-year patent, and basically they want to include this data protection, or you can say data exclusivity, so that the generic manufacturers cannot use the same data, right. So, what will happen because of data exclusivity? Here the basic problem is the monopoly of the companies will increase. When this data exclusivity is there, then beyond the patent period also this monopoly will increase. Please go through it. With the data exclusivity, a company could gain exclusive rights over such drugs even though they are not patented. Like that, I have given 3-4 points, but the most important point to note is this data exclusivity as claimed by the drugs manufacturers. If it is implemented, then in future generic drugs manufacturing may become difficult. They may not be able to give at lesser prices, right. That is what is the total crux of the article. Then, why IP like protection to data exclusivity is not advisable? The author is citing 3 points, please go through them. So, let us move on. This is Amaravati could become the prototype for building cities. More than this, because in Amaravati the capital area is around 215 square kilometers. Out of it, the author says 35 square kilometers has got the most precious soil, you can say. It is part of floodplains of Krishna river and one of the richest soils in the country as per the author, and he is suggesting some mechanism of developing the 35 square kilometers in the newly built capital, or which is going to be built now, Amaravati, on the banks of river Krishna. That is one aspect. And look at the other aspect. He is suggesting extracting water from the floodplains, extracting water from the floodplains. He is citing the example of Yamuna floodplains, and they are not affected by pollution. At the same time, if judiciously, when the water is taken out from below ground level, then it will not affect, aquifer will be safe, you will get pure water. So, he is suggesting tapping the floodplains of Yamuna river so as to get clean water. It will take care of part of the population of Delhi. That is as per this article. Here, extensive research in Yamuna floodplains have revealed that they are almost 100 meters deep and almost 5-6 kilometers wide and runs for nearly 48 kilometers in Delhi. So, the author suggests we can tap this perennial non-invasive water supply for the use of Delhi residents, and it could give a perennial water supply of 100 MCM, million cubic meters per year. And what do you understand by floodplain? Here you see floodplain, water is naturally stored in the sandy aquifer of the floodplains. Here it will be percolated down and it is stored in the sandy aquifer of the floodplain that is adjacent to the present river course, spreads across up to some kilometers this side, some kilometers that side. This is floodplain, and below that it has got sand aquifer which stores water and clean water is available. The author is suggesting usage of that water, right. In floodplain, water is naturally stored in the sandy aquifer of the floodplain. It is a porous and extensive aquifer, and if some of the water is withdrawn from the tube well using the motors, then the rest of the aquifer compensates the local withdrawal and the quality of water is good. It is not affected by pollution. The author says the water will go to the aquifers only during the rainy season, and when the lean months, when normally polluted water is there on the top, it normally does not penetrate into the ground. If at all it penetrates very slow. So, therefore, the water available in the underground aquifers of the floodplains is pure and it is uncontaminated. Then, what are the problems associated? The biggest problem here is it has to be withdrawn judiciously. When it is exploited, over exploitation is done, then what happens? The entire region will go with salinity. Saline water will come. If over exploitation is there, it will result in saline water. So, he is suggesting the methods to be followed while extracting water from the floodplains. So, if the salinity increases, then it will stand there for 1000 years. The biggest problem of extracting groundwater is we have to extract judiciously. We should not over exploit. If we over exploit, what happens? Then salinity of water will increase, right. So, we have to look at non-invasive perennial water so as not to disturb the ecosystem, and the author is telling that this is one source of water, right. Look at the last one on tribals and tigers. Here one act is there, Forest Rights Act of 2006. Forest Rights Act, Scheduled Tribes and other traditional forest dwellers, recognition of Forest Rights Act of 2006, and here basically it protects the rights of indigenous tribes. It protects the rights of indigenous tribes. At the same time, National Tiger Conservation Authority is there. National Tiger Conservation Authority, this is a statutory body. Please do not forget, National Tiger Conservation Authority is the statutory body, and it is constituted under the provisions of Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, and basically it looks at Project Tiger. Project Tiger is centrally sponsored scheme providing funding support to tiger range states, right. So, here center state, its objectives include fostering accountability of center state in management of tiger reserves, right. This is one aspect. We learnt about this National Tiger Conservation Authority, which is a statutory body, and at the same time during 2016 this important news item, please do not forget, Tiger Repository. India will have its first tiger repository on tigers, and this will be under the Tiger Cell it will be established with the collaboration of National Tiger Conservation Authority, and this will be managed by Wildlife Institute of India. So, these things do not forget. This first repository on tigers. Then this repository, you may have a doubt what is meant by repository. This consists of huge database on tiger conservation and population estimation. So, we learnt about tiger repository, then National Tiger Conservation Authority, then please look at some more information. There is a 49th Tiger Reserve as well as 50th Tiger Reserve are announced. From examination perspective, please do not forget this. Orang Tiger Reserve, please do not forget, this Rajaji is the 48th Tiger Reserve, this is in Uttarakhand, and Orang Tiger Reserve in Assam is India's 49th Tiger Reserve. At the same time, Kamlong Tiger Reserve, Kamlong Tiger Reserve is India's 50th Tiger Reserve. So, please do not forget from examination perspective Orang Tiger Reserve as well as Kamlong Tiger Reserve. Kamlong is in Arunachal Pradesh, Orang is in Assam. And let us go ahead. The existing guidelines says that the indigenous tribes must be protected. So, the conservation efforts of the tiger must be with a view without affecting the rights of the forest dwellers. But sometimes their rights are being affected, they are being dislocated. So, this is the crux of this matter. So, under Forest Rights Act, this tribal communities or indigenous tribes, they enjoy certain rights, but they should not be dislocated, and government is sometimes compromising on the aspects pertaining to various projects, but unnecessarily they are dislocating the tribal population. So, that is this one, and ground reality is, in fact, some of the tribes have helped in increasing the tribal population. Examples are Soligas in the BRT Tiger Reserve in Karnataka, Baigas in Kanha National Park in Madhya Pradesh, and you see the opposite. Sometimes this tribal communities are periodically evicted. That means they are implementing all rules and regulations for the tribal or indigenous communities, but when it comes to corporations, they are given a free hand to generate an environmental crisis, right. So, the point here is the existing indigenous tribes must be protected, right. Sometimes they are aiding in the conservation process also, right. So, it is necessary for the civil society and people's collectives to forge an alliance to prevent dissociating indigenous communities from the environmental conservation narrative. So, strengthening the Forest Rights Act and eliminating instances that marginalize people in the name of conservation will require greater policy attention. Right friends, with this let us conclude today's editorial discussion. So, please do join tomorrow at the same time. Have a nice day. Thank you.